It began with the sound of airplane tires screeching against the Moroccan runway, a sound that would echo through a tragedy no one saw coming. Daniel Cross said, "Feels like a dream, Amina." The desert wind carried that moment like a secret. He had flown across oceans for love, carrying a ring and a lifetime of hope. But how does someone vanish while cameras keep rolling? Why did the hotel staff say he checked out when his passport lay untouched? The scent of jasmine filled the terminal as Amina waited beyond the glass doors, her veil dancing in the wind. That night was supposed to seal their fate in joy, but fate had written a darker promise. Every step Daniel took toward her was one step closer to a mystery still haunting investigators today. The next morning, Daniel woke to the distant hum of prayer calls echoing through the Medina. Amina prepared mint tea, her movements graceful yet distant. He tried to joke about jet lag, but her eyes carried something else. A flicker of unease. "You're quiet," he said, and she smiled too quickly. Down in the courtyard, two men in traditional robes exchanged words in low tones while glancing up at their balcony. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into a story already written. He didn't know then that every smile he saw that day would be studied later by police frame by frame, trying to pinpoint the moment love turned to danger. By midday, Daniel and Amina visited the marketplace to collect wedding fabrics. The air shimmered with heat and noise. Vendors shouted, colors blurred, spices burned the air. "You'll love it here," Amina said, but her hand tightened around his. He noticed people staring at them, not curious, but wary. A woman selling jasmine bracelets muttered something in Arabic that made Amina stiffen. "What did she say?" Daniel asked. Amina smiled faintly. She wished us happiness, but her eyes told another story. That fleeting lie would soon unravel into something no one could have imagined. That evening, the pre-wedding dinner was held in Amina's family home. An old villa painted with age. Her mother's welcome was warm but measured. Her brother's handshake cold. Daniel tried to ignore it, laughing, drinking sweet tea, talking about Texas. Yet beneath the laughter, silence lingered like smoke. Amina's brother watched every move Daniel made. When Daniel looked his way, the man smiled. The kind of smile that hides a warning. Later that night, Amina whispered, "They just need to know you better." But Daniel sensed it wasn't acceptance they were waiting for. Night crept over the city as lanterns flickered outside the riad. Daniel stood on the balcony, staring at the skyline. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "our forever begins." Behind him, Amina sat brushing her hair, lost in thought. She seemed fragile, like someone waiting for something inevitable. When he turned, she smiled and said, "It's already begun." Hours later, that same balcony would be surrounded by police tape. That moment, captured by chance on a neighbor's camera, would later become the first frame of a haunting investigation that still divides two nations. The wedding day arrived with drums, laughter, and the scent of orange blossoms floating through the Moroccan air. Daniel stood in a cream suit, his eyes never leaving Amina, as she stepped into the courtyard in silver and gold. "You look unreal," he whispered. She smiled faintly, though her gaze flickered toward her brother, who stood watching in silence. Guests clapped, cameras flashed, and vows were exchanged beneath a canopy of lanterns. Yet behind every bright moment, an unspoken tension hummed, felt but unseen. How could a night of love turn into a crime scene before dawn? When Daniel kissed his bride, he didn't see the shadow pass across her face. Later that evening, Daniel and Amina entered their hotel suite at the historic La Mamounia. The door clicked shut with a soft echo, sealing them off from the celebration. Daniel opened champagne while Amina stood by the window, gazing at the garden lights below. "To us," he said, raising his glass. She hesitated before sipping. The air felt strange, heavy. The hotel cameras showed them entering together, but not him leaving. Somewhere between laughter and silence, something inside that room shifted forever. Just after midnight, Hotel security cameras captured flickers of movement in the hallway. A neighbor later reported hearing muffled voices, something like an argument, then silence. "Daniel, please." Emma's voice trembled, followed by a loud thud. Minutes later, her shadow appeared on the door frame, motionless. When staff entered the suite the next morning, the bed was unmade, champagne spilled, and the window opened to the warm desert air. But Daniel Cross was gone. The man who'd crossed oceans for love had vanished without a trace, leaving only confusion and fear behind. Morning sunlight crept into the hotel corridor as a maid knocked on the door repeatedly, calling, "Monsieur?" No answer. When she entered, her scream echoed down the hall. Amina sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her gown, her hands trembling. "He left," she whispered, staring at the window. The police arrived minutes later, and Detective Karim Nouri stepped inside. One glance told him something wasn't right. The room spoke of panic, not departure. The broken glass, the overturned chair, the faint trail of blood near the balcony. Every detail whispered a truth Amina refused to say aloud. Outside, journalists gathered as police sealed the suite. Amina was escorted out, eyes downcast, her veil gone. Karim walked beside her, silently noting every twitch, every hesitation. "Did he say where he was going?" he asked. "He was angry," she said softly. "He left after midnight." Karim glanced at her bare wrist where her bracelet had once been. The security footage didn't match her timeline. Somewhere inside the hotel's ornate walls, a trail of truth waited to be found. But the desert sun already burned away the night's secrets. Detective Karim Nouri studied the hotel surveillance footage in a dim office at the Marrakesh police station. The screen flickered with ghostly light as he watched Daniel and Amina enter the suite. At 10:47 p.m. and never come out together. Karim leaned back, his tired eyes narrowing. "There is always a pattern," he muttered. Behind him, his junior officer noted times, doors, and shadows. Outside, the city roared with traffic. Unaware, a story of love had turned to mystery. Daniel Cross' name now sat in the missing persons registry, but Karim felt the weight of something deeper. A lie too carefully woven to be chance. Karim visited La Mamounia to walk through the suite himself. The scent of stale champagne and dust hung in the air. He noted the scuff mark on the floor near the balcony and the faint imprint of a ring box on the nightstand. If he left, Karim whispered. He didn't plan to. The security team watched him uneasily as he inspected the window. Beyond it, the gardens shimmered in heat. He imagined the missing man's last moments, confusion, confrontation, perhaps betrayal. Each step Karim took drew him deeper into the web Amina had spun, whether knowingly or not. When Karim questioned Amina, she appeared calm. Too calm. Sitting across from him, she spoke softly, eyes never leaving his. "He argued with me. He left," she repeated. Karim slid a photo across the table. Daniel smiling, ring in hand. "You expect me to believe he vanished into thin air?" he asked. Amina hesitated, her lips parting, but no words came. For a moment, her mask cracked, and fear flickered behind her calm. Karim leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Sometimes, people lie because they've already told the truth once, and it broke them." Later that night, Karim returned to his apartment, overlooking the old Medina. Rain tapped against the windows as he poured coffee and reviewed the case file. Daniel's passport, wallet, and watch had been found in the room, but his phone was gone. Karim scrolled through reports until a note caught his eye. Unknown male seen at rear entrance. 2:13 a.m. He played the footage. A man in a dark jacket walking briskly into the alley behind the hotel. The image was blurry, but something about the figure's posture felt familiar. Karim exhaled sharply, whispering, "Someone helped him disappear, or helped hide him." 2 days later, Karim received a call from Texas. It was Sarah Holt, Daniel's sister. Her voice shook with worry and anger. He would never just leave. "Something's wrong," she insisted. Karim listened quietly, then said, I believe you." He promised her the truth, no matter where it led. As he hung up, the call left a heaviness in the air, the weight of expectation of two families bound by loss. The Moroccan wind howled outside his window as Karim pinned Daniel's photo to his investigation board. The case was no longer just professional, it was personal. Sarah Holt arrived in Marrakesh under a bruised sky, her heart pounding with dread. As she walked through customs, the heat struck her like a wall. She carried a folder of photos and every unanswered question from home. At the police station, Karim met her with quiet empathy. "You look like your brother," he said. Sarah's voice trembled. "Then find him for me." Karim handed her the latest report. Daniel's phone pinged once, miles from the city, then went dark. Somewhere between love and betrayal, the desert had swallowed its secret whole. Sarah's arrival would soon rip the calm open. Amina's family villa stood silent when Karim arrived with Sarah. The air inside smelled faintly of incense and something older. Grief, perhaps, or guilt. Amina's mother greeted them with distant politeness. Her brother avoided eye contact entirely. "You're here for him?" the mother asked. "We just want the truth," Karim said softly. Sarah watched Amina emerge from the hallway, dressed in plain white, her face pale as chalk. For the first time, the two women faced each other, one searching for her brother, the other haunted by what she might have done. That night, Karim and Sarah reviewed the old files in his office. Daniel's bank records revealed 3 large transfers to an account in Morocco, one belonging to Amina's brother. Sarah's hands shook as she whispered, "He sent money for the wedding. Why is it under his name?" Karim stared at the document. "Because someone used him," he replied. The puzzle pieces began to align: the rushed wedding, the watchful brother, the missing phone. Somewhere, the truth waited like a mirage. Karim scribbled one note in his pad: "Follow the money, find the bot." Karim returned to the hotel archives, searching the staff records. One name reappeared: Rafik Zahra, Amina's brother, listed as a subcontractor during renovation. A forgotten security wing key was signed out in his name weeks before the wedding. Karim's pulse quickened. He followed the clue to a restricted basement door behind the banquet hall. The corridor reeked of dust and damp air. There, under a loose floorboard, he found a small, blood-stained tie clip engraved with Daniel's initials. Karim closed his eyes. This was no disappearance. It was a cover-up crafted by someone close enough to touch him. By dawn, Karim confronted Amina in the station once more. The tie clip lay between them on the table. "It was your brother," she whispered, tears streaking down her face. "He thought Daniel was using me." Karim's gaze didn't waver. "And you helped hide it?" She looked away, voice breaking. "I was afraid." Outside, Sarah stood in the corridor, hands trembling as she heard muffled sobs. The truth had arrived, but it brought no peace, only the beginning of another kind of reckoning. The next morning, a call came from the outskirts of Marrakesh. A farmer had found something unusual near an abandoned riad on the edge of the desert. Karim and Sarah arrived as the sun rose over the dunes, the air thick with heat and silence. Beneath a cluster of stones lay a blood-stained cufflink, engraved like the tie clip, DC. Sarah's knees weakened as she whispered her brother's name. Karim knelt, studying the soil, its disturbed layers hinting at a recent burial. "He was brought here," he murmured. The desert, vast and indifferent, had kept its secret long enough. Inside the decaying riad, Karim's flashlight illuminated a narrow stairway leading underground. The air smelled of dust and iron. Sarah hesitated at the threshold, whispering, "I don't want to remember him like this." Karim replied, "But this is where the truth sleeps." Each step creaked underfoot as they descended into a small cellar where scraps of burned fabric and a torn passport page lay in the corner. The initials, or RZ, were scratched into the wall. Karim's jaw tightened. The brother hadn't just hidden evidence. He had been here the night Daniel vanished. Later that evening, Karim tracked Rafiq Zahara's vehicle through a network of rural cameras. The pickup truck had been spotted leaving the city 2 nights before Daniel's disappearance and returning before dawn. Karim followed the route to an old quarry south of Marrakesh, the road lined with whispering palms. He felt the weight of inevitability pressing closer. "It always ends in the desert," he muttered. In his gut, he knew the journey that began in love was about to end in dust and confession. When Karim reached the quarry, the silence was absolute. He found fresh tire marks leading behind a cluster of boulders. There, half buried in sand, was a shallow grave covered in fabric fragments matching Daniel's suit. Karim fell to one knee, brushing sand from the ground, his heart pounding. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The forensics team arrived moments later. Sarah stood at a distance, tears tracing lines through the dust on her face. The sun dipped behind the horizon, turning the dunes blood red, as if the earth itself remembered what had been done. Night fell as police lights cast blue pulses across the dunes. Amina was brought to the site, wrapped in a shawl, trembling as she stared at the excavation. "I didn't know," she whispered. Karim's gaze hardened. "But you knew enough." Sarah approached her slowly. "He loved you," she said. Amina broke down, collapsing to her knees, her cries swallowed by the wind. The evidence told its story. Daniel Cross had died where love and fear collided. And though the case was nearing its end, the question that lingered was one no one dared to ask aloud. Who swung the final blow? The interrogation room was silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. Amina sat motionless, her wrists trembling. Across from her, Karim laid a photo of the cufflink, the burned passport page, and the shallow grave. "Tell me what really happened," he said. Her eyes filled with tears that refused to fall. "Rafiq wanted to scare him," she whispered. "He thought Daniel was stealing from us. I tried to stop them." Karim's voice softened. "But he didn't stop, did he?" The truth pressed at the walls like a storm, and Amina finally broke. Daniel hit his head when they fought. He never woke up. For the first time, the truth felt heavier than the lie. Outside the room, Sarah watched through the glass, frozen between grief and fury. Karim joined her quietly. "He's gone," she said, her voice hollow. Karim nodded. "But now, we can bring him home." Sarah's hands pressed against the cold glass as she looked at Amina inside, the woman who had shared Daniel's last moments. "She loved him," Sarah murmured. Karim replied, "Sometimes love is the sharpest weapon." For a long moment, they both stood there, separated by the truth they had chased across continents. The case had found its answer, but not its peace. Later that evening, Amina gave her full statement. She described the fight, Daniel accusing Rafiq of taking his money, Rafiq shouting, "Pushing!" A fall, the thud against the marble floor. "He wasn't breathing," she whispered. Rafiq panicked. "I helped him move the body. I thought if I told, my family would be destroyed." Karim took down every word, his face carved from stone. When she finished, silence filled the room. "You buried love with your hands," he said quietly. Amina looked up, eyes hollow, and it still won't stay buried. Rafiq Zahra was arrested that night outside the villa. The courtyard filled with flashing blue lights and stunned neighbors. He didn't resist, only asked to see his sister. When Amina appeared in handcuffs, he whispered, "I was protecting you." She shook her head, whispering back, "You destroyed everything." Karim watched silently, knowing there were no victors here, only survivors. As the police van door shut, Marrakesh's night swallowed the sound. Somewhere in the distance, the muezzin's call echoed like a final prayer for the dead. At sunrise, Karim stood alone at the edge of the dunes where Daniel was found. The wind carried the faint scent of sand and ash. Sarah had left for Texas that morning, Daniel's belongings packed in a small wooden box. Karim stared toward the horizon, thinking of all the promises the desert had swallowed. Love, loyalty, Truth, he whispered to the wind. Justice isn't peace. The case would close, but its shadow would linger in his mind like an unfinished prayer, echoing through every silence that followed. Weeks later, Karim sat in his office, the case file closed, but not forgotten. Yet something wouldn't let him rest. The autopsy report came back with a detail that didn't fit. Daniel's head wound wasn't from a fall, but from a deliberate strike. Karim stared at the report, his mind tightening around one final question. Who swung it? He replayed Amina's statement in his head. Her pauses, her tears, her contradictions. She lied to save someone, he whispered. And in that moment, the story he thought was finished began to breathe again. Karim returned to the prison to speak with Rafiq one last time. The man looked defeated, his eyes sunken. You said Daniel hit his head, Karim began. But his wound, it came from behind. Rafiq's gaze flickered, then steadied. I didn't kill him, he said coldly. Karim leaned forward. Then who did? Rafiq hesitated before whispering. She tried to stop him from leaving. Karim froze, the meaning cutting deep. Amina's confession had been incomplete. She hadn't protected her brother. She'd protected herself. Karim confronted Amina once more, this time in her cell. The walls were bare, her eyes darker than ever. He was leaving you, wasn't he? Karim said softly. Amina didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, he said he wanted to go home. I begged him to stay. Karim's voice trembled with quiet anger, and when he didn't, her face broke apart. I only pushed him, she cried. He fell. Then there was blood. Karim turned away, closing his notebook. The truth, when spoken aloud, sounded smaller than the pain it carried. At Daniel's memorial in Texas, Sarah placed his photograph beneath an oak tree behind their childhood home. The air was still, the sky a soft gray. She whispered, You found your forever, just not the way you dreamed. Her voice broke as she laid down his ring beside the photo. Somewhere far away, Marrakesh continued to live its endless rhythm, unaware that one man's love had crossed oceans and ended in silence. Grief, like desert sand, clung to everything. Impossible to wash away completely. In Marrakesh, Karim walked once more through the courtyard where Daniel and Amina had first met. The fountains murmured, the air heavy with jasmine. He paused where the wedding canopy had stood, his reflection rippling in the water. Two people met here, he said quietly, and both lost themselves. The camera would fade on his face, caught between duty and sorrow. The city lights shimmered behind him as the muezzin's call rose again, not for the living or the dead, but for the truth that lingers long after both have gone.